I've just turned the last page of Walter Isaacson's riveting biography of Elon Musk. Today, I'll share my thoughts about why SpaceX is so different from other aerospace companies, including Boeing, and how Tesla's market value has surpassed that of its 5 biggest rivals combined. I'll shed light on those questions through a theoretical lens of institutional theory. But what exactly is institutional theory, and how does it help us see companies through a new perspective? For foundational understanding, be sure to watch my previous video where I introduce institutional theory. Here I briefly summarize institutional theory. It's a theory explaining that organizations operate within a framework of social norms, rules, and understandings that guide their behavior and decisions. Those institutional elements, which are more enduring than the individuals who temporarily assume organizational roles, shape the way organizations function and evolve. For example, the organizational behaviors of entities like NASA, which as a government agency often exhibits characteristics of being highly procedural and bureaucratic. This is because those organizations operate within a strict framework of regulations and formal procedures that guide their operations. Those institutional elements endure beyond individual tenure, providing structure and continuity, but potentially leading to a slower, more rigid decision-making process. When we juxtapose this with companies like Tesla and SpaceX, which are known for their agility and innovation, we can start to see how the influence of institutional norms and rules can vary significantly across different types of organizations. Think of organizational theory like the unwritten social rules that guide how a company behaves. Companies are like members of a community, and they look around to see how others are doing things. When they notice that certain ways of working are accepted and seem successful, they tend to copy them. This is why so many companies often end up looking and acting the same. It's a bit like fashion trends. When a style becomes popular, everyone starts wearing it. In simple terms, an institution in this context is like the traditions in a society that continue over time. No matter who is there, they're the common ways things are done that everyone accepts without question, because that's just how it's always been done. Institutional theory also explains why different companies in the same industry can look so alike. They all tend to follow the leader, copying the ones that seem to be doing well to fit in and be accepted. It's like in school, where everyone may start dressing or talking like the popular kids to be part of the group. This copying makes them blend together. That's a big part of what shapes how companies operate day to day. When we apply institutional theory to Tesla and SpaceX, we have a better understanding why they stand out from their competitors. It's like finding out why certain rebels in school refuse to follow the popular trends. I'll focus on 6 key constructs of institutional theory: infusion of value, diffusion, rational myth, loose coupling, legitimacy, and isomorphism. The 6 key constructs will help us understand why Tesla and SpaceX are not going with the flow. Instead, they're creating their own currents. We'll explore those concepts to see how they make Tesla and SpaceX distinct in a world where companies often look like mirror images of each other. The first concept of institutional theory is infusion of value. It means that organizations weave certain values into their routines and practices, which become institutionalized over time. SpaceX's vision, as articulated by founder Elon Musk, is to enable humans to become a spacefaring civilization and a multiplanetary species by establishing a permanent human presence on Mars. This bold vision infuses values into SpaceX organizational practices. For example, SpaceX organizational practices emphasize cross-functional collaboration and hands-on involvement at all levels. Managers are not siloed into merely designing components. Instead, they work alongside manufacturing and testing teams. It breaks down traditional development barriers, encouraging innovation and rapid problem solving. And this is seen in their iterative design process for spacecraft like the Falcon and Starship series. It also creates a cohesive understanding of projects from conception to execution, which is essential in achieving their vision of advancing human space travel. Here is another example. In the book, there is a quote, "All technical managers must have hands-on experience." For example, managers of software companies must spend at least 20% of their time coding. Solar roof managers must spend time on the roof doing installations. Otherwise, they're like a cavalry leader who cannot ride a horse or a general who can't use a sword. This quote reflects the infusion of cultural values, specifically the belief in the importance of technical managers being intimately involved in the hands-on work of their teams. By requiring managers to engage directly with the core activities of their teams, the organization is assigning intrinsic value that effective management is grounded in practical experience, and it carries an implicit critique of detached, purely administrative management styles. Musk's values are succinctly captured in a quote from the book. When hiring, looking for people with the right attitude. Skills can't be taught. Attitude changes require a brain transplant. This principle came to life in the tale of an engineer who got an undergraduate and graduate degree in aerospace engineering, which landed him what he thought was his dream opportunity, an internship at Boeing. But dissatisfaction set in quickly, and he decided to visit a friend who was working at SpaceX, where an eye-opening experience awaited. Recounting the visit, the engineer remarked,
"I will never forget walking the floor that day. All the young engineers working their asses off and wearing t-shirts and sporting tattoos, and being really badass about getting things done. I thought, these are my people. It was nothing like the buttoned-up deadly vibe at Boeing."
After his SpaceX visit, he made a presentation to a VP at Boeing about how SpaceX was enabling the younger engineers to innovate. He cautioned the VP, if Boeing doesn't change, you're going to lose out on the top talent. The VP responded,
"Maybe we want the people who aren't the best, but who will stick around longer."
Met with indifference and a preference for longevity over innovation, the engineer left Boeing and embraced the values of SpaceX, where attitudes like his were not just welcomed, but were essential to the company's fabric. The second key concept of institutional theory is diffusion. It's about the process through which the innovative practices and technologies become widespread among organizations within a particular field. Elon Musk's SpaceX has been at the forefront of championing reusable rocket technology. By successfully landing and refurbishing rockets for repeated use, SpaceX has not only demonstrated the feasibility and economic viability of this approach, but has also begun to reshape industry norms. This innovation reduces costs and increases the frequency of space missions, serving as a benchmark for other aerospace entities. SpaceX advancements exert pressure on competitors to add similar sustainable and cost-effective measures, thereby accelerating the diffusion of reusable rockets as a standard practice in the industry. Similarly, Tesla, another Elon-led venture, is influencing the automotive industry with its emphasis on electric vehicles. Tesla's commitment to sustainability, evident in its innovative battery technology and renewable energy integration, has created a ripple effect. Traditional automakers, recognizing the shift in consumer preference and regulatory landscapes towards cleaner energy, are increasingly investing in EV technology, following Tesla's lead. This trend towards EV, initially propelled by Tesla, is now becoming an industry standard, showcasing the diffusion of those transformative practices from a single entity to a global scale. The third key concept of institutional theory is rational myth. It means that practices that organizations adopt are not necessarily because they are the most efficient, but because they are seen as legitimate and are culturally valued. Elon Musk, a proponent of defying convention, challenges those rational myths as described by DiMaggio and Powell. In his venture, SpaceX and Tesla serve as prime examples of this confrontation. SpaceX's successful reuse of orbital rockets upends the long-held belief of single-use spacecraft, while Tesla disapproves the rational myth that electric cars cannot be powerful or popular. One of the commitments in Musk's company is that the only rules are the ones dictated by the laws of physics. Everything else is a recommendation. This perspective underlies a commitment to innovation over tradition, urging that organizational practices be flexible and open to scrutiny rather than shackled by rational myths, ingrained but potentially unfounded beliefs about the proper way to operate. The book later elaborates on it by a longer quote: "Question every requirement. Each should come with the name of the person who made it. You should never accept that a requirement came from a department, such as from the legal department or the safety department. You need to know the name of the real person who made that requirement. Then you should question it, no matter how smart that person is." Requirements from smart people are the most dangerous because people are less likely to question them. Always do so, even if the requirement came from me. Then make the requirements less dumb. The directive to question every requirement insists that mandates be accompanied by the name of their creator, embodies this value. It is a strategy to prevent the perpetuation of rational myths by ensuring accountability and creating a culture of critical analysis by advising that even well-regarded experts, including himself, should be questioned. Elon promotes a culture where rational myths are dismantled in favor of rational and effective practices, dispelling the notion that any practice is beyond scrutiny just because it is rooted in authority or tradition. SpaceX's success in securing the commercial orbital transportation services contract marked a pivotal moment for both the company and the American space program. It introduced a competitive alternative to the cost-plus contracts that had long been the norm for NASA and the Defense Department. Under such contracts, the government retained tight reins on projects, outlining exact specifications and compensating companies like Boeing or Lockheed Martin for all expenses, plus profit. This model, standardized during World War II, aimed to consolidate government oversight over weapon development and avert the stigma of war profiteering. When a company is assured of its profit, regardless of the actual cost, there is little to no incentive to innovate or find more cost-effective methods. Innovation often arises from the need to overcome constraints, but cost-plus contracts, by definition, remove such financial constraints. Moreover, cost-plus contracts often lack penalties for delays. This can inadvertently incentivize companies to exceed their schedules because those contracts typically reimburse all allowable expenses plus a fixed profit. Therefore, the longer a project takes, the more a company can charge. And this potential for increased revenue from extended timelines can reduce the incentive to complete the project efficiently. Musk advocated for a paradigm shift during his testimony before a Senate committee in Washington, D.C. He criticized the cost-plus contract for dampening innovation by rewarding overruns rather than efficiency or creativity. Boeing and Lockheed just want their cost-plus gravy trains, Musk contended. He argued that such a model was inherently flawed for ambitious space exploration goals like reaching Mars because it bred a counterproductive, endless reliance on government funding. SpaceX proposed and implemented a model where private entities competitively bid to execute specific tasks or missions, such as delivering payloads into orbits for the government. This fixed-price, outcome-driven contract structure incentivized companies to invest their own capital and rewarded them upon achieving predefined milestones. This model vested more autonomy in the private companies over the design and construction of their rockets, aligning profitability with performance and efficiency. It rewards results rather than waste. Musk asserted embodying a new practice in aerospace contracting that reward innovation and fiscal responsibility. The fourth concept of institutional theory is loose coupling. It means that while there may be formal structure in place, actual practices may differ, allowing for flexibility in organizations. The practical execution in organizations may not always align tightly with their formal structures, thereby granting a certain degree of operational flexibility. In Musk companies, a notable gap can often be observed between the official hierarchical structure and the more dynamic, informal way decisions are made. For example, while Tesla has traditional corporate hierarchy on paper, Musk is known for his hands-on involvement and rapid decision-making style, which often overrides the traditional slow-moving bureaucratic channels characteristic of the automotive industry. Musk's practice, whenever there are problems to solve, don't just meet with your managers. Do a skip level where you meet with the level right below your managers. Epitomizes the principle of loose coupling. This guidance urges a bypass of rigid hierarchical protocols, promoting direct communication between different organizational levels. It's an effort to cultivate an environment where information and solutions flow freely, thereby potentially creating a more innovative and actively engaged workforce. Here is a quote from the book. Camaraderie is dangerous. It makes it harder for people to challenge each other's work. There is a tendency not to want to throw a colleague under the bus. That needs to be avoided. The sentiment expressed in the quote critically appraised the impact of camaraderie in the workplace, pointing out its potential to deter individuals from providing necessary critique of their peers' work, thereby weakening accountability and diligence in organizational procedures. The quote warns against the pitfalls of strong social ties in professional settings that can prevent constructive criticism and accountability. It advocates for maintaining a balance between personal camaraderie and professional obligations, reflecting the institutional theory's concept of loose coupling, which encourages maintaining strong independence between interpersonal relationships and the job responsibilities to safeguard the integrity and the performance of the organization. The fifth key concept of institutional theory is legitimacy. It means that an organization's activities are congruent with social norms, values, and expectations. But legitimacy in mass companies is often built through groundbreaking achievements and building a strong brand reputation, rather than just adhering existing norms. Tesla's branding as an eco-friendly and innovative company has garnered normative legitimacy that resonates with environmentally conscious consumers and investors. SpaceX's journey to legitimacy also involved challenging entrenched norms. This is illustrated by Musk's scrutiny of the weight and cost disparities between SpaceX Merlin engines. During the initial phase of producing its first Merlin engines, a conversation between Musk and the chief engineer Tom Mueller spotlighted the stark contrast between the mass and cost of SpaceX engines compared to Tesla's. Musk asked, "The Tesla engine is 4 times as heavy as your engine. Why does yours cost so much?" This question shed light on the stringent specifications and requirements imposed by military and NASA directives that traditionally drove up cost, a practice rigorously adhered by the established aerospace companies. Contrary to this norm, Musk championed a culture of scrutiny and rationalization, later codified into a fundamental step of his 5-point algorithm for product development. He challenged his engineers to justify every requirement, demanding the name of the person who decided it was necessary. Tom Booza, a former Boeing engineer who would become SpaceX vice president of launch and testing at SpaceX, recalled Musk's questions. "Why do we have to do that?" and his refusal to accept there is a military specification that says it's a requirement as an answer. Musk was insistent. Who wrote that? Why does it make sense? In Musk's mind, the only rules are the ones that dictated by the laws of physics. Everything else is a recommendation. The 6th key concept of institutional theory is isomorphism. It refers to the trend toward uniformity among organizations in the field as they adapt to assimilate in order to gain legitimacy, access to resources, and survival. This concept explains that why organizations in the same field are often so similar to one another, and suggests that leadership has limited impact due to the enduring nature of institutional structures. Most companies frequently push back against the mold and challenge coercive isomorphism, which means pressure from laws and regulations, by lobbying for changes that align with his company's interests and goals, thereby changing the field itself. Elon Musk's resistance to the isomorphic pressure in the aerospace industry is illustrated by his reaction to NASA's non-competitive $227 million contract to Kistler for resupplying the International Space Station, a task Elon Musk was confident that SpaceX could accomplish. NASA's justification for the no-bid contract was because the other company's financial arrangements are shaky, and NASA did not want it to go bankrupt. There would be other contracts for SpaceX to bid on. Frustrated by NASA's rationale to safeguard Kistler's shaky finances, Musk chose a path of confrontation over compliance, challenging absence of a competitive bidding process. Musk's disregard for the potential consequences of such a lawsuit on SpaceX's relationships with NASA was clear.
"Everyone told me that it might mean we would never be able to work with NASA, but what they did was wrong and corrupt, so I sued."
The result was a victory for SpaceX, compelling NASA to open bids competitively, thereby securing a share of the contract for SpaceX. Reflecting on the outcome, Musk recounted to the Washington Post,
"That was a huge upset. Literally imagine like a 10-to-1 odds underdog winning. It blew everyone's mind."
This anecdote underscores Musk's defiance of institutional conformity. demonstrating his belief in innovation and meritocracy over traditional, perhaps complacent industry practices. Here is another example from the book that epitomizes Musk's resistance to isomorphic tendencies in the aerospace industry. When faced with a $2 million quote for crane construction based on Air Force safety regulation, Musk's team re-evaluated those standards, many of which were outdated, and eventually reduced the cost to $300,000. Such scrutiny of cost extended to components as well, with Musk urging his team to consider alternatives to expensive aerospace parts. This led to innovative solutions like repurposing a $30 bathroom stall latch instead of using a standard $1,500 NASA latch. Another example of cost innovation is the air cooling system for Falcon 9's payload bay, which is the section designed to carry the cargo or spacecraft that the rocket is intended to deliver into space. When quoted over $3 million, Musk compared it to household air conditioning system, which led to the adoption of commercial unit at a fraction of the cost. By breaking away from traditional methods, the launch pad for the Falcon 9 was built at just 10% of the cost of the launch pads built at Lockheed and Boeing. The actions of Elon Musk, as described, are a counterexample of isomorphism. Instead of mirroring the practices of established aerospace companies, Musk and his SpaceX actively sought to differentiate themselves by questioning industry standards and pursuing innovative, cost-effective solutions. This illustrates a departure from the mimetic processes that lead to homogeneity among organizations, which is central to the concept of isomorphism. In this video, I applied the 6 key concepts of institutional theory to explain why Elon Musk, Tesla, and SpaceX defy their competitors in the same industry. Leading those trailblazing companies is no easy task, as they chart unconventional paths that often diverge from the established industry standards. This maverick approach, while it breaks new ground, carries with it potential risk, from the scrutiny of regulators to the pressing questions about the sustainability of such disruptive innovation. Let's cast a critical eye on the intensely demanding work culture Musk is known for, a culture that ignites unparalleled motivation but also leads to potential employee burnout. And we must consider, could the successes of Musk companies be uniquely attributed to his distinctive approach, deeply entwined with personal brand and financial clout? This raises the question of whether other companies would launch into similar orbits with someone like Elon Musk at their helm. Feel free to share your comments below. Thanks for watching. I will see you next time.